Anigasio, in today's video, we'll talk about BTS military service phase and how that time changed them. Shija Gebo Shida. Let's get started.
안녕하세요, 팬 여러분. 둘셋 화! 자!
Before the word military entered every conversation about BTS, they were already standing at a place very few artists ever reach. Global tours, standout stadiums, historic awards. It felt like BTS were everywhere all at once. But behind that success, their lives were moving at an instant pace. Schedules were tight, expectations were high, and even though they smiled on stage, there were moments when you could sense the weight they were carrying. They weren't just idols anymore, they had become a symbol for music, for youth, for an entire generation. And when you are at your absolute peak like that, every decision becomes bigger than just yourself. Which is why, when the topic of military service came closer, it wasn't just a personal choice, it became a national conversation. And to understand why that moment matters so much, we need to understand what military service means in South Korea. In South Korea, military service is not optional. It's a responsibility that applies to almost every able bodied man, regardless of fame or status. Actors go, athletes go, idols go. It represents equality, the idea that no matter who you are, you serve the country first. For BTS, this wasn't about losing fame or pausing a career. It was about choosing respect, responsibility, and long term integrity. There were debates, yes, questions, discussions, expectations, but eventually the message became clear. This was a chapter they would face head on, not avoid. And once that decision was made, everything became to shift. Not just for BTS, but for the audience that had grown with them. Because the next phase wasn't about music anymore, it was about separation. The days leading up to enlistment were quiet. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no loud announcements, just simple messages, short updates, and calm smiles. The kind that try to hide uncertainty. For fans, this was unfamiliar territory. For the first time in years, there would be no group promotions, no constant content, no shared moments in real time. It felt like a pause, but not a comfortable one. People weren't just missing artists, they were missing a routine, a comfort, a presence in their daily lives. And yet, something unexpected happened. Instead of fading, the connection deepened. Old songs were revisited, lyrics were understood differently. Moments from the past suddenly felt more meaningful. The absence didn't weaken the bond, it strengthened it. Because this wasn't just about waiting for a comeback anymore. It was about trusting growth that couldn't be seen yet. And while fans were learning patience, the members were stepping into a life they hadn't lived in over a decade. A life without the spotlight. Military life is structured, repetitive, and quiet. No cameras, no stages, no applause. For BTS, this meant something rare normalcy. They followed routines like everyone else, woke up early, trained, waited, listened. And in that simplicity, perspective grows. Without constant pressure, there was space to reflect on identity, on purpose, on life beyond success. This phase wasn't about performance, it was about discipline, humility, and rediscovering the self. The world kept moving, trends changed, music evolved, but somewhere in uniform, they were grounding themselves in something deeper. And slowly, as time passed, Another headline began to appear: Completion, Return, Homecoming. The news of completion didn't arrive all at once. It came member by member, quietly, respectfully, and each return felt different, not louder, not flashier, just calmer. There was a visible change, not dramatic but noticeable. A maturity in the way they spoke, a steadiness in how they carried themselves. This wasn't the excitement of rookies or the hunger of rising stars. This was something else: experience. The military didn't erase who they were, it added layers. It reminded them of structure, teamwork, patience, and time. Things that can't be rushed. And as fans watched them return, the feeling wasn't just happiness, it was reassurance. The growth that happened even in silence. Which brings us to the final question: what does this comeback really mean? This comeback isn't about proving relevance. It's not about charts or numbers. It's about continuity. BTS are returning not as they left, but as versions shaped by time, responsibility, and reflection. The future doesn't need to be rushed. The music doesn't need to shout. Because when artists grow this deeply, their presence speaks for itself. This isn't a restart, it's a continuation with more meaning, more intention, and more depth. And for the audience, this chapter reminds us of something important. Waiting is not always empty. Sometimes it's where the strongest changes are formed.